Every 247 days, this was a year for the Specks of Rylonite, chosen arbitrarily because they did not have seasons, the Specks had their annual feast, which was called the Filange per Junkie. The great day began with the concert of rubbing, where the entire population of Rylonite, young and old alike, rubbed their heads on the hairy particles until they collapsed exhausted, unable to lift a limb. About 3 hours after this frenzy, some Specks regained enough strength to shakily pull themselves upright. Then the male Specks began the harvest of cubes, while the female Specks prepared gastronomic delights, such as cube fondue, cube salad, cube roast, cube soup, cube and cube on a stick for the kids, cube paste, cube fillet, cube pie, cube relish, cube stuffing, blackened cube, cube kebabs, cube sherbet, deep fat fried cube, cube cake, deep fat fried cube cake, barbecued cube, cube chowder, glazed cube, cube pandowdy, broiled cube, blackened cube, cube thermidor, cube on the rocks for the adults, steamed cube, smoked cube, and of course Susan's cube bubble loaf. While the delicious smells of cube cookery were filling the air, those who were not busy found time to participate in fun Filange per Junkie games, like "Come over here," "Hey, you just bumped my friend's elbow," "Are you just going to stand there?" and "This is my bucket." The day culminated with the Filange per Junkie dance, which they performed lying on their backs, with their feet as high in the air as they could possibly get them. First prize going to the dancers with their feet highest up. King Rod, whom the Specks of Rylonite thought was King Rylonite, used the occasion of Filange per Junkie to campaign for re-election, since 12 days after the picnic was polling day. The Specks voted every year, but they only had 2 choices: King Rod green ballot or King Rod purple ballot. Either way, King Rod got re-elected. Filange per Junkie was the Specks of Rylonite forgotten Day of Atonement. They knew that in their past there was a definite day set aside as a Day of Atonement, but it was forgotten before King Rod ever took over the position of King Rylonite. At least they knew there once was a Day of Atonement, but the Specks could not remember what they needed atonement for. After King Rod took the throne, a Speck named Heffamoot, during the demolition of a shoe foundry, found a vague historical reference to a Day of Atonement called the Filange per Junkie. The king's advisors advised the king to declare a new Filange per Junkie, and to have the marketing department think of some fun things to do on it. No one could think of anything they needed atonement for, so the day is mostly remembered for the annual feast or for the dancing thing. The Specks of Rylonite determined when one day was over and a new day had begun, by having the day determiner hold the determiner stone out at her side at arm's length. When the day's day determiner could no longer hold her arm up, the day was declared done, and the next day determiner took up the stone. Being the day determiner was a prestigious honor, but no she-Speck was allowed to do it more than once a year. Rylonite Specks married in 3s, 2 grooms and a bride, or 2 brides and a groom. In either case, the spouse with the 2 counterspouses had to alternate every day, being a spouse to one, and then the next day to the other. Each Speck year the sequence is renewed, starting with the spouse who was shorted by 1 day the previous year. The marriage ceremony of Rylonite was short and simple. The 3 Specks went before the king on the assigned day of their marriage appointment. Each stated their vows, which consisted only of a promise to abide by the custom of spouse alternating and a promise to never get ugly. The vows were repeated in this way. The king said to each Speck in turn, "Do you promise to never get ugly?" To which each respond in turn, "I do." Then, in the case of 1 groom and 2 brides, for example, the king said to the groom Speck, "Repeat after me. I take you to be one of my wedded wives, and you to be the other of my wedded wives. Annulment usually stemmed from one of the two brides or one of the two grooms, in the case of one bride and two grooms, feeling slighted because she was not the first one named in the vow. Divorce usually stemmed from one spouse being cheated out of his or her fair share of marriage days on leap year, when an extra day went to the spouse, who then renewed the New Year's sequence.